Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. As you might guess, having heard the governor's remarks earlier today, this is an extraordinarily powerful moment. Notwithstanding the kind of budget that he has proposed, particularly the issues that it speaks to in terms of P20 education, but because it really does represent an opportunity for us to blend a number of principles of work that maybe have long since needed sort of authorship throughout the entire state. And a good deal of the conversation that I've been having with the governor and other members of his team have really been about how to sort of bring elements or principles of this work together so that essentially not only do children and families do well, but the economy does well, the state does well, subgroups do well, employability is up, and a whole host of really important economic factors begin to pay off, really, by virtue of education as a major statewide driver of transformation. And so a number of people have said to me from time to time, mostly from back east, from New York and Miami and other places, Rudy, why Oregon? Why would you, given the work that you've done in big cities around the state, around the country, why Oregon? And I would tell you that my answer routinely has been, and to the governor was, you have an opportunity here, the likes of which no other state in the union has at this juncture. We have an environment here not only made possible by the business community, but made possible by the education community to merge interests in a way that fundamentally create both new opportunities, but also actually ask us to rise to a level of leadership in which we actually greet those opportunities by going through the challenges of building new and merged systems. What I'd like to do would be to just talk a little bit about what those opportunities are and where the tensions lie. I mean, no good speech would be worth its weight if, in fact, it didn't point to the fact that everything is not rosy. There are some real tensions inherent in doing this work. But the incredible opportunity in doing it is that you get to work through them, and that on the other side will be opportunities for many, many, many thousands of young people. Some young, some middle-aged, some going back to school, community colleges, being trained for jobs that hopefully will be in their own backyard here in Oregon over the course of the next several years. One of the things that as I listened backstage to the governor's remarks, one of the things that I kept saying to myself was what a young boy said to me one time in New York. When I shook his hand, he was a little fourth grader in a school in Brooklyn, and I shook his hand, and he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm the Chancellor of New York City." And he said, "You must be the man." Kind of when the governor came back off of giving that speech, I said to him, "You're the man, brother. You're the man." And here's why. The part of that speech that obviously resonated most with me is around the fact that this is, in fact, a budget that focuses on children. And I'm not talking about children in the necessarily sort of just the age cohort. I'm talking about young people and their ability to remain in Oregon because they are trained here, because they are from here, because they have a gene pool that's from here, neighborhoods from here, and because they see that there are jobs in and around this community, the likes of which they've been prepared to take. It's not an artifact to talk about children first. It's not just sort of a slogan. When I hear the governor or others talking about this, it's not even just a call for new behaviors or new patterns of thinking. What it really is it's a 10-year strategic investment, all designed to do very specific things. And I'd like to put my finger on several of those things very quickly. One, it is designed to connect jobs and economic, if you will, educational preparation. It is fundamentally the time and place in American history where how people are prepared is completely and explicitly linked to what's available in the job market, and their preparation becomes, if you will, a driver of the state and ultimately the nation's GDP. It's also designed to leverage existing practice and scale it, to ask the question, what have we been doing all these years that is worthy of being scaled throughout the entire state, so that necessarily best of practice rises. And we don't have to necessarily put more money into things that are sort of trial and error. It's also designed to connect human development with economic development. When I said a minute ago, this isn't just about age cohorts of young children versus older children, this is about human development and how that human development fits into the scheme of economic development for the state. And most importantly, as I said earlier, this is really designed to actually ask leaders to go through this tension. Whether you're a college president, whether you're a K-12 school superintendent, whether you're a school board member, whether you're in the OEIB office, it really doesn't matter. What essentially this budget does, and the way that it has been articulated, and the way that it's been put together, is it basically says, all right, people, you complained a long time about the absence of investment, that there weren't enough dollars to basically make this work. And I believe, and as the governor has said many times, that we are still woefully underfunded. But it does say, with what you have, innovate, change, and be there on behalf of these children. Create what doesn't exist, build what you must, collaborate where you will, but fundamentally orient this engine of economic development such that it in fact touches the lives of every student in this great state. So here's how I see the layout of that in the budgetary sort of analysis of it, and maybe I may add a little bit of a quick note or a footnote about where I see some of the tension as well. The first thing I would say is, and the governor put his finger on this, was this is really fundamentally about sort of starting at the early learning end of things. There's basically never been and probably never will be any more coherent piece of research about the education of young people in this country than the research around the value proposition of young people 0 to 3 and 3 to 5 getting the kind of start in school that essentially allows them to be ready for, if you will, literacy and training as they go directly into kindergarten and first grade. That is a reasonable, thoughtful, and well-researched beginning portion of this budget. There's some $48 million that is intended to actually focus on just that linkage. There is a fair amount of attention that will be paid to how parents are trained in the business of being able to do this work. And this is not necessarily parents, necessarily just any parent. This is all parents, and particularly parents whose first language isn't English. If you look at the birth cohorts of who's coming into this state, if you look at where we are actually losing young people as they go forward into the system, and why some of our community colleges and higher educational institutions have so many developmentally oriented students, it's because they started out without the necessary literacy skills way early in their lives. This is an ability to actually say, budgetarily, we are going to fix that problem. Well over a quarter of the students, 4 out of 10 students in this state do not, at this point in time, come to school ready to learn. They do not have fundamental literacy skills. A second thing that the governor's budget does is he basically puts his finger on something that for me has been a long-standing issue, whether it was in New York or in Miami, which is about literacy. Now, I want to say to you that if we were in a business and I said that what we wanted you to ultimately improve productivity, you would say, well, the variables that I get to work with are time and raw material. And in this instance, it's time that we're actually going to be focusing on. That we've got to actually put more effort into being able to provide literacy skills through library, through media services, through a whole host of things in the community, not necessarily just in the school, but in the community. And that investment really represents not just an investment in the mechanics of it, but the investment in the ability to have more time. Our young people are dying in many ways by virtue of having not enough time to actually acquire these skills, and they go through, limping through the rest of the system forever without them. Third thing, there's $90 million roughly in that. The third area is one that has been near and dear to my heart for a long period of time, since I spent a fair amount of time in business school and graduate school and a whole host of other places looking at this question of global readiness. And what does it really look like for our young people to kind of step out into the 21st century world? And how do we compare internationally as well as nationally at being able to do that? And I would suggest to you that there is probably no better indicator than the ability to put dollars behind STEM and the ability to make those dollars actually respond to and create opportunities on every single campus or every single region within this entire state, where STEM-level instruction, STEM-level guidance, STEM-level job accessibility and preparation is in fact thought of strategically, and it's developed and designed for students to be able to access jobs in this area upon graduation. More degree STEM holders are people from outside the state of Oregon as opposed to inside. We've got more people from outside of the state who have degrees in this area than inside the state. We actually have less than about 4% of our current high school graduates who, if you followed them straight through all the way to graduation from a four-year institution, about 4% of those young people will have, or something near 4% will have a degree in a STEM field. It's far too small a margin. This issue of STEM is probably going to be aided in large part by the work of so many of you in here and the work that's already been in many of our higher education institutions who kind of saw this some time ago, viewed it as being important many months, if not years ago, saw the trend on who and what countries engineers were largely being produced in, and where they were coming, the kind of dollars they were being able to occupy in the economic and the labor market. One of the ways of being able to kind of get this off the ground and get it supported has been the collaboration with the Oregon STEM Employers Coalition. They and the governor and myself and others who are connected to this body of work are really looking forward to the dollars that are going to be put in here. This will probably end up being seed money to go throughout the entire state. We view this as going to be a way by which universities, community colleges, K-12 institutions, all within the P20 world will have an opportunity to really think through what would a footprint look like, what would the pipeline look like, what would the curriculum be, how would we actually ensure that students got onboarded into these areas, how are they ultimately going to have to change some of the interior, if you will, of the connecting points between higher education, community colleges, and K-12, such that more and more and more students see this as not just a viable way of making a living, but see it as an extraordinarily accessible way. And while we're talking about access, let me just tell you that when you really look at this, again, by virtue of the population we have in this state, this is going to be a particularly important issue as we think about how young women get into STEM fields and what specific initiatives and outreach has to be made in order for that to be a reality. And the same would be true for children of color, children whose first language is not English. We cannot afford to not make those kind of outreaches such that those communities are left out of the STEM work and the STEM initiatives that we're describing herein. There is one other, or actually several other issues, I'll be very quick about them, that I think all sort of emanate from both the STEM work and the literacy work. Probably nothing could be more important than how our teachers are trained. I would argue that having been a high school principal and a superintendent for a long period of time, we oftentimes take for granted that sort of anybody can do this. No, wrong. Not anybody can know or teach a child how to read. Not anybody can know or teach a child how to get over their block and their loss of confidence in math and science and engineering. We actually have to invest in people being able to know the strategies designed to do just that. And that's a big piece of what we mean by when we talk about this issue of teacher development and teacher support. There is a need for us to think through this question of how guidance would actually add value to a college-going culture. I was in Coos Bay and Chiloquin and a number of other places all over the state not too long ago, and I remembered listening to students who came forward in hearing some of the priorities, and they said, well, listen, I'm a first-generation college goer. I'm the first one in my family ever to go to college. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to finish if, in fact, I don't have an ability to have some additional dollars either on the front end or the back end to finish my college education. I need guidance as to whether or not I'm going to be able to go directly into the field that I'm hopeful of being able to onboard into. So we see an investment being made really not just in guidance per se, but in a college-going culture, if you will, and a career-going culture in the state of Oregon. And last and certainly not least, and I mentioned this earlier, there is a need for us to put our finger right on where education really starts, which is in the home. There are countless numbers of parents who are trying desperately to figure out how do you use this system, whether it's the old cell-by-cell system or the P20 system, whatever it is, how do I access it, how do I use it, how do I provide opportunities for my young student in my household as a way of being able to make him or her go further than I was able to do in my own life. I am pleased at the kind of thoughtfulness and the kind of integration that this actually requires, but I will tell you that the devil is in the detail here. That the tension inherent in institutions that have not yet talked to each other because they didn't have to before, now having to talk to each other, the tension is palpable. I will tell you that I have seen great signs. I've met with college presidents from community colleges as well as four-year institutions. I've met with all the superintendents. I've had an opportunity to meet with most, if not all, of the commission heads and directors. Everyone wants to ultimately do this, but in the final analysis, it's going to be a question of do we actually put it together. And I'll close on this note that in the final analysis, this is about leadership, people. All the money that the governor has put forward, all the opportunity that's inherent in this potential P20 body of work, it's about our own ability to be entrepreneurial, to step outside of our own comfort, to ask as well as we answer, to focus on young people, to not only make them first, but to make our institutions first rate in how we actually create opportunities for them. I am absolutely sure. I have a fair amount of history of sort of dancing on the head of a pin. And I remember talking with Rudy Giuliani sometime in my early tenure in New York City. And he said to me, Rudy, you got a lot of third graders, 80, 90,000 third graders, or kids between 0 and third grade, who are not literate. Can you fix this? And I thought for a moment, I said, I better come up with the right answer with this man. I said, yeah, Rudy, it's possible. It's possible. He said, well, here's what I'm doing. He said, I'm going to look in your eye. I'm going to ask it one more time. And then I'm going to ask you, what does it take to do this? And I want you to think about the answer. And he asked me again. And I said, Rudy, what it's going to take is it's going to take some investment in it. You're going to have to invest in what parents do. You're going to have to invest in what our teachers do and how they are trained to be able to do it. But you're going to have to ultimately count on the horses you have to run this race, and that means the leaders in and around our educational institutions. And those people are the people who have to now show up in every dimension of collaboration, of thoughtfulness, of integration of policy, of the ability to ultimately pull these dollars together and leverage them such that even though it is, if you will, a baseline holding formula budget, that we still are able to make the kind of strides in taking a bite out of some of the crime that has happened in some of our classes and grades across this continuum. We cannot stand as a state in which we ultimately have large numbers of kids who go through this system limping through without adequate skills, be they hard skills or soft skills, and think that they're going to be able to emerge successfully into the 21st century. This is the quest of this budget. This is the subtle, if not so subtle, demand of the governor. I, for one, believe that we no longer have anything or anybody in our way as a way of being able to create the opportunity and maximize this as a body of work. I am pleased to join not only you, but the members of the academic and educational community in being able to forge this work, and most importantly, to basically put our finger on the pulse of what it would take to finally marry the economic development of a state with the educational engine of a state, and to do well by every single child and every single student. Thank you very, very much.